Hey y'all, we got about 5 minutes left. I should be able to kind of chill here now. I'm uploading some videos to YouTube. I have like 3 left. We're gonna do 17 today. So let's see how it goes. What? Makes sense. We're talking about work. So I'm almost done with Misery. And yeah, it's quite interesting. It's different from the movie though. I got some suggestions of, instead of doing a Stephen King next, of doing like an adventure, a drama, a romance or something. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. So if you guys have any ideas and you want me to do another Stephen King, let me know. That way I can decide. So we'll see how we go. Between the pages of a book is a lovely place to be. Isn't that nice? It's bookmarked from the library. So, how far does 18 get us today? If we do 18. 18. That's not too bad. I think we can get through that today. So, if y'all are ready, we shall begin. I think we got pretty much everybody that we're going to have today. Let me let one person know. Alright. So, as you may know, I am Lady Rain. We are reading Bag of Bones, and we are on chapter 17. So when we left off, he found that there were meetings noted all over the sheets Lord had sent him, dozens of them, meetings in 93, meetings in 94, meetings of boards to which she'd no longer belonged. See, she'd quit those boards, but she'd been down on the TR. So on all those meeting days, Joe had been on the TR. I would have bet my life on it. But why? Will he ever find out? Chapter 17. Devore was mad, all right, mad as a hatter, and he couldn't have caught me at a worse, weaker, more terrified moment. And I think that everything from that moment on was almost preordained. From there to the terrible storm they still talk about in this part of the world, it all came down like a rock slide. I felt fine the rest of Friday afternoon. My talk with Bonnie left a lot of questions unanswered, but it had been a tonic just the same. I made a vegetable stir-fry, atonement for my latest plunge into the fry-o-later at the village cafe, and ate it while I watched the evening news. You all right? On the other side of the lake, the sun was sliding down toward the mountains and flooding the living room with gold. When Tom Brokaw closed up shop, I decided to take a walk north along the street. I'd go as far as I could and still be assured of getting home by dark. And as I went, I'd think about things Bill Dean and Bonnie Edmondson had told me. I'd think about them the way I sometimes walked and thought about plot snags and whatever I was working on. I walked down the railroad tie steps, still feeling perfectly fine. Confused, but fine. Started off along the street, then paused to look at the green lady. Even with the evening sun shining fully upon her, it was hard to see her for what she actually was, just a birch tree with a half-dead pine standing behind it, one branch of the latter making a pointed arm. It was as if the green lady was saying, "Go north, young man, go north." Well, I wasn't exactly young, but I could go north all right, for a while at least. Yet I stood a moment longer, easily studying the face I could see in the bushes. Not liking the way, a little shake of breeze seemed to make what was nearly a mouth sneer and a grin. I think perhaps I started to feel a little bad then. A little bad then. Was too preoccupied to notice it. I set off north, wondering what exactly Jo might have written. For by then I was starting to believe she might have written something after all. Why else had I found my old typewriter in her studio? I would go through the place, I decided. I would go through it carefully and help, I'm drowned. The voice came from the woods, the water from myself. A wave of lightheadedness passed through my thoughts, lifting and scattering them like leaves in a breeze. I stopped. All at once I had never felt so bad, so blighted in my life. My chest was tight, my stomach folded in on itself like a cold flower. My eyes filled with chilly water that was nothing like tears, and I knew what was coming. No, I tried to say, but the word wouldn't come out. My mouth filled with the old taste of lake water instead, all those dark minerals, and suddenly the trees were shimmering before my eyes as if I were looking up at something through clear liquid, and the pressure on my chest had become dreadfully localized and taken the shapes of hands. They were holding me down. "Won't it stop doing that?" someone asked, almost cried. There was no one on the street but me, yet I heard the voice clearly. Won't it ever stop doing that? What came next was the outer voice and alien thoughts in my own head. They beat against the walls of my skull like moths trapped inside a light fixture and inside a Japanese lantern. "Help, I'm drowned. Help, I'm drowned. Blue cap man say get me. Blue cap man say dasn't let me ramble. Help, I'm drowned. Lost my berries, they on the path. He hold me, he face shimmer and look bad. Let me up, oh sweet Jesus, let me up. Oxen free, alley, oxen free, please. Oxen free, you go on and stop now. Alley, oxen free." She screams my name. She screams it so loud. I bent forward in utter panic, opened my mouth, and from my gaping, straining mouth, there poured a cold flood of nothing at all. The horror of it passed, and yet it didn't pass. I still felt terribly sick to my stomach, as if I had eaten something to which my body had taken a violent offense. Some kind of ant powder, or maybe a killer mushroom, pictured inside bread borders. I staggered forward half a dozen steps, gagging dryly from my throat, which still believed it was wet. There was another birch where the bank dropped to the lake, arching its white belly gracefully over the water as if to see its reflection by evening's flattering light. I grabbed it like a drunk grabbing a lamppost. The pressure in my chest began to ease, but I felt an ache as real as rain. I hung against the tree, heart fluttering, and suddenly I became aware that something stank. An evil, polluted smell, worse than a clogged septic pool, which has simmered all summer under the blazing sun. With it was a sense of some hideous presence driving off that odor, something which should have been dead and wasn't. "Oh, stop, Allie, oxen free, I'll do anything, only stop," I tried to say, and still nothing came out. Then it was gone. I could smell nothing but the lake and the woods. But I could see something. A boy in the lake. A little, drowned, dark boy lying on his back. His cheeks were puffed out. His mouth hung slackly open. His eyes were as white as the eyes of a statue. My mouth filled with the unmerciful iron of the lake again. "Help me, let me up, help, I'm drowned." I leaned out, screaming inside my head, screaming down at the dead face, and I realized looking through the rose shimmer of sunset water at the white man in the blue jeans and yellow polo shirt, polo shirt, holding onto a trembling birch and trying to scream. His liquid mouth in motion, his eyes momentarily blotted out by the passage of a small perch coursing after a tasty bug. I was both the dark boy and the white man, drowned in the water and drowning in the air. Is that right? Is this right? Is this what's happening? Tap once for yes and twice for no. I retched nothing but a single runner of spit, and possibly a fish jumped at it. They jumped at almost anything at sunset. Something in the dying light must make them crazy. The fish hit the water again, about 7 feet from the bank, spanking out a circular silver ripple, and it was gone. The taste in my mouth, the horrible smell, the shimmying, drowned face of the Negro child. A Negro, that was how he would have thought of himself, whose name had almost surely been Tidwell. I looked to my right and saw a gray forehead of rock poking out of the mulch. I thought, there, right there. And as if in confirmation, that horrible, putrescent smell puffed at me again, seemingly from the ground. I closed my eyes, still hanging onto the birch for dear life, feeling weak and sick and ill. And that was when Max Devore, that madman, spoke from behind me. Stay there, whoremaster, where's your whore? Or stay there, whoremaster, where's your whore? I turned and there he was, with Roget Whitmore by his side.
Wait, the guy's name is whoremaster?
No. It was the only time I have ever met him, and once was enough, believe me, once was more than enough. His wheelchair hardly looked like a wheelchair at all. What it looked like was a motorcycle sidecar crossed with a lunar lander. 6 chrome wheels ran along both sides. Bigger wheels, 4 of them, I think, ran in a row across the back. Nothing looked to be exactly on the same level, and I realized each was tied into its own suspension bed.
Oh, yeah.
Devore would have a smooth ride over ground a lot rougher than the street. Above the back wheels was an enclosed engine compartment hiding Devore's legs as a fiberglass nacelle, black with red pinstriping. That would not have looked out of place on a racing car. Implanted in the center of it was a gadget that looked like a DSS satellite dish. Some sort of computerized avoidance system, I guess. Maybe even an autopilot. The armrests were wide and covered with controls. Holstered on the left side of the machine was a green oxygen tank 4 feet long, a thick accordion tube. The accordion tube led to a mask which rested in Devore's lap. It made me think of the old guy's steno mask. Coming on the heels of what had just happened, I might have considered this Tom Clancy-ish vehicle a hallucination. Except for the bumper sticker on the nacelle below the dish. I bleed Dodger blue, it said. This evening, the woman I had seen outside the Sunset Bar at Warrington's was wearing a white blouse with long sleeves and black pants so tapered they made her legs look like sheathed swords. Her narrow face and hollow cheeks made her resemble Edvard Munch's screamer more than ever. That's funny. Her white hair hung around her face in a lank cowl. Her lips were painted so brightly red, she seemed to be bleeding from the mouth. She was old and she was ugly, but she was a prize compared to Maddie's father-in-law. Scrawny, blue-lipped, the skin around his eyes and corners of his mouth a dark exploded purple. He looked like something an archaeologist might find in a burial room of a pyramid, surrounded by his stuffed wives and pets, bedizened with his favorite jewels. A few wisps of white hair still hung to his scally skull. Scaly skull. More tufts sprang from enormous ears, which seemed to have melted like wax sculptures left out in the sun. He was wearing white cotton pants and a billowy blue shirt. Add a little black beret, and he would have looked like a French artist from the 19th century at the end of a very long life. That's funny. Across his lap was a cane of some black wood. Snugged over the end was a bright red bicycle grip. A bright red bicycle grip. The fingers grasping it looked powerful, but they were going as black as the cane itself. His circulation was failing, and I could imagine what his feet and his lower legs must look like. Cora ran off and left you, has she? I tried to say something. A croak came out of my mouth, nothing more. I was still holding the birch. I let go of it and tried to straighten up, but my legs were still weak, and I had to grab it again. He nudged a silver toggle switch, and the chair came 10 feet closer, halving the distance between us. The sound it made was a silky whisper. Watching it was like watching an evil magic carpet. Its many wheels rose and fell independent of one another and flashed in a declining sun, which had begun to take on a reddish cast. And as he came closer, I felt the sense of the man. His body was rotting from underneath him, but the force around him was undeniable and daunting, like an electrical storm. The woman paced behind him, regarding me with silent amusement. Her eyes were pinkish. I assumed that they were that I assumed then that they were gray and had picked up a bit of the coming sun. But I think now she was an albino. I always liked a whore, he said. He drew the word out, making it horror. Didn't I, Roget? Yes, sir, she said, in their place. Sometimes their place was on my face, he cried with a kind of insane perkiness, as if she had contradicted him. Where is she, young man? Whose face is she sitting on right now, I wonder? That smart lawyer you found? Oh, I know all about him. Right down to the unsatisfactory conduct he got in the 3rd grade. I make it my business to know things. It's the secret of my success. What are you doing here? Having a constitutional, same as you. No law against it, is there? The street belongs to anyone who wants to use it. You haven't been here long, young whoremaster. But surely you've been here long enough to know that. It's our version of the town common, where good pups and vile dogs may walk side by side. Once more using the hand not bunched around the red circle grip, he picked up the oxygen mask, sucked it deeply, then dropped it back. That is so sweet. So sweet. Once more using the hand not bunched around the red bicycle grip, he picked up the oxygen mask, sucked deeply, then dropped it back in his lap. He grinned. An unspeakable grin of complexity with revealed gums the color of iodine. She good? That little whore of yours? She must be good to have kept my son prisoner in that nasty little trailer where she lives. And then along comes you even before the worms have finished with my boy's eyes. Does her cunt suck? Shut up. Roget Whitmore threw back her head and laughed. The sound was like a scream of a rabbit caught in house talons. Okay, imagine the scream of a rabbit that's caught in house talons. That is one loud, nasty scream. And my flesh crawled. I had an idea she was crazy as he was. She was as crazy as he was. Thank God they were old. You struck a nerve there, Max, she said. What do you want? I took a breath and caught a taste of that putrescence. Oh my God. Putrescence again. I gagged. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. DeVore straightened in his chair and breathed deeply. as if to mock me. In that moment, he looked like Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now, striding along the beach and telling the world how much he loved the smell of napalm in the morning. His grin widened. Lovely place, just here, isn't it? A cozy spot to stop and think, wouldn't you say? He looked around. This is where it happened, all right. Yeah? Where the boy drowned? I think Whitmore's smile looked momentarily uneasy at that. Devore didn't. He clutched for his translucent oxygen mask with an old man's over-wide grip, fingers that grope rather than reach. I could see little bubbles of mucus clinging to the inside. He sucked deep again, put it down again. 30 or more folks have drowned in this lake, and that's just the ones they know about, he said. What's one boy, more or less? I don't get it. Were there two Tidboydales who died here? The one that got blood poisoning and the one... Do you care about your soul, Mr. Noonan? Your immortal soul? God's butterfly caught in a cocoon of flesh that will soon stink like mine. I said nothing. The strangeness of what had happened before he arrived was passing. What replaced it was his incredible personal magnetism. I have never in my life felt so much raw force. There was nothing supernatural about it either. And raw is exactly the right word. I might have run. Under other circumstances, I'm sure I would have. It certainly wasn't bravery that kept me there where I was. My legs still felt rubbery, and I was afraid I might fall down. I'm going to give you one chance to save your soul, Devore said. He raised a bony finger to illustrate the concept of one. Go away, my fine whoremaster, right now, in the clothes you stand in. Don't bother to pack a bag. Don't even stop to make sure you turned off the stove burners. Go. Leave the whore. Leave the whorelet. Leave them to you? To me. I do the things that need to be done. Souls are for liberal arts, Majors Noonan. I was an engineer. Whitmore made that screamy rabbit sound again. The old man sat in his chair, head lowered, grinning sallowly up at me and looking like something raised from the dead. Are you sure you want to be the one, Noonan? It doesn't matter to her, you know. You or me, it's all the same to her. I don't know what you're talking about. I drew another deep breath, and this time the air tasted all right. I took a step away from the birch, and my legs were all right too. And I don't care. You're never getting Kyra. Never in what remains of your scaly life. I'll never see that happen. Pal, you'll see plenty, Devore said, grinning and showing me his iodine gums. Before July's done, you'll likely have seen so much you'll wish you'd ripped the living eyes out of your head in June. I'm going home. Let me pass. Go home then. How could I stop you? He said. The street belongs to everyone. He groped the oxygen mask out of his lap again and took another healthy pull. He dropped it into his lap and settled his left hand on the arm of his Buck Rogers wheelchair. I stepped toward him, and almost before I knew what was happening, he ran the wheelchair at me. He could have hit me and hurt me quite badly, broken one or both of my legs, I don't doubt, but he stopped just short. I leaped back, and only because he allowed me to. I was aware that Whitmore was laughing again. What's the matter, Noonan? Get out of my way, I'm warning you. Or made you jumpy? Has she? I started to my left, meaning to go by him on that side, but in a flash he had turned the chair, shot it forward, and cut me off. Go out the TR, Noonan. I'm giving you good at... I broke to the right this time on the lakeside and would have slipped by him quite neatly except for the fist very small and hard, that hammered the left side of my face. The white-haired bitch was wearing a ring, and the stone cut behind my ear. I felt the sting and the warm flow of blood. I pivoted, stuck out both my hands, and pushed her. She fell to the needle-carpeted path with a squawk of surprised outrage. At the next instant, something clouded me on the back of my head. A momentary orange glow lit up my sight. I staggered backward in what felt like slow motion, waving my arms, and Devore came into view again. He was slewed around in his wheelchair, scaly head thrust forward, the cane he'd hit me with still upraised. If he had been 10 years younger, I believe he would have fractured my skull instead of just creating that momentary orange light. I ran into my old friend, the birch tree. I raised my hand to my ear and looked unbelievingly at the blood on the tips of my fingers. My head ached from the blow he had fetched me. Whitmore was struggling to her feet, brushing pine needles from her slacks and looking at me with a furious smile. Her cheeks had filled in with a thin pink flush. Her two red lips were pulled back to show small teeth. In the light of the setting sun, her eyes looked as if they were burning. "Get out of my way," I said, but my voice sounded small and weak. "No," Devore said, and laid the black barrel on the nacelle of the curved over the front of his chair. Now I could see the little boy who had been determined to have the sled no matter how badly he cut his hands getting it. I could see him very clearly. "No, you whore fucking sissy, I won't." He shoved the silver toggle switch again, and the wheelchair rushed silently at me. If I had stayed where I was, he would have run me through with his cane, as surely as an evil duke was ever run through in an Alexandra Dumas story. He probably would have crushed the fragile bones in his right hand, torn his right arm clean out of the socket in the collision, but this man had never cared about such things. He left cost counting to the little people. If I had hesitated out of shock or incredulity, he would have killed me, I'm sure of it. Instead, I rolled to my left. My sneaker slid on the needle-slippery embankment for a moment, and then they lost contact with the earth, and I was falling. I hit the water awkwardly, much too close to the bank. My left foot struck a submerged root and twisted. The pain was huge, something that felt like a thunderclap sound. I opened my mouth to scream, and the lake poured in. That cold, metallic, dark taste. This time, for real. I coughed it out and sneezed it out and floundered away from where I had landed, thinking, the dead boy's down here. What if he reaches up and grabs me? I turned over on my back, still flailing and coughing, very aware my jeans clinging clammily to my legs and crotch, thinking absurdly about my wallet. I didn't care about the credit cards or driver's license, but I had 2 good snapshots of Joe in there, and they would be ruined. Devore had almost run himself over the embankment, I saw, and for a moment, I thought he still might go. The front of his chair jutted over the place where I had fallen. I could see the short tracks of my sneakers just to the left of the birch's particularly exposed roots. And although forward wheels were still grounded, the crumbly earth was running out from beneath them in dry little avalanches that rolled down the slope and pitter-patted into the water, creating interlocking ripple patterns. Whitmore was clinging to the back of the chair, yanking on it, but it was much too heavy for her. If Devore was to be saved, he would have to save himself. Standing waist-deep in the lake with my clothes floating around me, I rooted for him to go over. The purplish claw of his left hand captured the silver toggle switch after several attempts. One finger hooked it to backward, and the chair reversed away from the embankment with a final shower of stones and dirt. Whitmore leaned prankishly to one side to keep from to keep her feet from being run over. Devore fiddled some more with his controls, turned the chair to face me, where I stood in the water, some 7 feet out from the overhanging birch, and then nudged the chair forward until he was on the edge of the street, but safely away from the drop-off. Whitmore had turned away from us entirely. She was bent over with her butt poking in my direction. If I thought about her at all, and I can't remember that I did, I suppose I thought she was getting her breath back. Devore appeared to be in the best shape of the 3 of us, not even needing a hit of the oxygen mask sitting in his lap. The late light was full in the face, making him look like a half-rotted jack-o'-lantern, which he had been soaked with gas and set on fire. "Enjoying your swim?" he asked, and laughed. I looked around, hoping to see a strolling couple or perhaps a fisherman looking for a place where he could wet his line one more time before dark. Yet at the same time I hoped I'd see no one. I was angry, hurt, and scared. Most of all, I was embarrassed. I had been dunked in the lake by a man of 85, a man who showed every sign of hanging around and making sport of me. I began wading to my right, south back toward my house. The water was about waist deep, cool and almost refreshing now that I was used to it. My sneakers squelched over rocks and submerged birch trees. The ankle I'd twisted still hurt, but it was supporting me. Whether it would continue to once I got out of the lake was another question. Devore twiddled his controls some more. The chair pivoted and came rolling slowly along the street, keeping pace with me easily. "I'd introduce you properly to Roquette." "Oh, I didn't introduce you properly to Roquette, did I?" he said. "She was quite the athlete in college, you know. Softball and field hockey were her specialties, and she's held on to at least some of her skills. Roquette, demonstrate your skills for this young boy." Whitmore passed the slowly moving wheelchair to the left. For a moment, she was blocked out by it. When I could see her again, I could also see what she was holding. She hadn't been bent over to get her breath. Smiling, she strode to the edge of the embankment with her left arm curled around her midriff, crackling the rocks she had picked up from the edge of the path. She selected a chunk roughly the size of a golf ball, drew her hand back to her ear, and threw it at me, hard. It whizzed by my left temple and splashed into the water behind me. "Hey!" I shouted, more startled than afraid. Even after everything that had preceded it, I couldn't believe this was happening. "What's wrong with you, Roquette?" Devore asked childishly. You never used to throw like a girl. Get him." A second rock passed 2 inches over my head. The third was a potential tooth smasher. I batted it away with an angry, fearful shout, not noticing until later that it had bruised my palm. At the moment, I was only aware of her hateful, smiling face, the face of a woman who had plunked down $2 in a carny shooting pitch and means to win the biggest stuffed teddy bear, even if she has to blast away all night. And she threw fast. The rocks hailed down around me, some splashing into the ruddy water to my left or right, creating little geysers. I began to backpedal, afraid to turn and swim for it, afraid that she would throw a really big one the minute I did. Still, I had to get out of her range. Devore, meanwhile, was laughing a wheezy old man's laugh, his wretched face crunched in on itself like the face of a malicious apple doll. One of her rocks struck me a hard, powerful blow on the collarbone, and bounced high into the air. I cried out, and she did too. "Ha!" Like a karate karate fighter who's gotten in a good kick. So much for orderly retreat. I turned, swam for deeper water, and the bitch brained me. The first 2 rocks she threw after I began to swim seemed to be rangefinders. There was a pause, and then I had time to think. I'm doing it, I'm getting beyond her area of, and then something hit the back of my head. I felt it and heard it the same way. It went clunk, like something you'd read in a Batman comic. The surface of the lake went from bright orange to bright red to dark scarlet. Faintly, I could hear Devore yelling approval and Whitmore squealing her strange laugh. I took in another mouthful of iron-tasting water and was so dazed I had to remind myself to spit it out, not swallow. My feet now felt too heavy for swimming, and my goddamn sneakers weighed a ton. I put them down to stand up and couldn't find the bottom. I had gotten beyond my depth. I looked in toward the shore. It was spectacular, blazing in the sunset, like stage scenery lit with bright orange and red gels. It was probably 20 feet out from the shore now. Devore and Whitmore were on the edge of the street watching. They looked like Mom and Dad in a Grant wood painting. Devore was using the mask again, but I could see him grinning inside it. Whitmore was grinning too. More water sloshed in my mouth. I spit most of it out, but some went down, making me cough and half retch. I started to sink below the surface and fought my way back up, not swimming, but only splashing wildly, expanding 9 times the energy I needed to stay afloat. Panic made its first appearance, nibbling through my dazed bewilderment with sharp little rat teeth. I realized I could hear a high, sweet buzzing. How many blows had my poor head taken? Whitmore's fist, one from Devore's cane, one rock, or had it been 2? Christ, I couldn't remember. Get a hold of yourself, for God's sake. You're not going to let him beat you this way, are you? Drown you like the little boy was drowned? No, not if I can help it. I trod water and ran my left hand down the back of my head. Not too far above the nape, I encountered a goose egg that was still rising. When I pressed on it, the pain made me feel like throwing up and fainting at the same time. Tears rose in my eyes and rolled down my cheeks. There were only traces of blood on the tips of my fingers when I looked at them, but it was hard to tell about cuts when you were in the water. You look like a woodchuck caught out in the rain, Noonan. Now his voice seemed to roll to where I was, as if across a great distance. Fuck you, I said. I'll see you in jail for this, or I called. He looked at Whitmore. She looked back at the identical expression, and they both laughed. If someone had put an Uzi in my hands at that moment, I would have killed them both with no hesitation, and then asked for the second clip so I could machine gun the bodies. With no Uzi to hand, I began to dog paddle south toward my house. They paced me along the street. Him rolling his whisper quiet wheelchair, she walking behind him, as solemn as a nun and pausing every now and then to pick up a likely looking rock. I hadn't swum enough to be tired, but I was. It was mostly shock, I suppose. Finally, I tried to draw a breath at the wrong time, swallowed more water, and panicked completely. I began to swim in toward the shore, wanting to get to where I could stand up. Roget Whitmore began to fire rocks at me immediately, first using the ones she had lined up between her left arm and her midriff, then those she'd stockpiled in Devore's lap. She was warmed up and wasn't throwing like a girl anymore, and her arm was deadly. Stones splashed all around me. I batted them away. The big one that likely would have cut open my forehead if it had hit. But her follow-up struck my bicep and tore scratch, a long scratch there. Enough. I rolled over and swam back out beyond her range, gasping for breath, trying to keep my head up in spite of the growing ache in the back of my neck. When I was clear, I trod water and looked in at them. Whitmore had come all the way to the edge of the embankment, wanting to get every foot of distance she could. Hell, every damned inch. Devore was parked behind her in his wheelchair. They were both still grinning, and now their faces were as red as the faces of imps in hell. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Another 20 minutes and it would be getting dark. Could I keep my head above water for another 20 minutes? I thought so. If I didn't panic, and not much longer. I thought of drowning in the dark, looking up and seeing Venus just before I went under for the last time. And the panic rat slashed me with its teeth. Again. The panic rat was worse than Roget and her rocks, much worse. Maybe not worse than Devore. I looked both ways along the lakefront, checking the street wherever it wove out of the trees for a dozen feet or a dozen yards. I didn't care about being embarrassed anymore, but I saw no one. Dear God, where is everybody? Gone to the Mountain View in Freiburg for pizza or the Village Cafe for milkshakes? What do you want? I called back to Devore. You want me to tell you I'll butt out of your business? Okay, I'll butt out. He laughed. Well, I hadn't expected it to work. Even if I'd been sincere about it, he wouldn't have believed me. We just want to see how long you can swim, Whitmore said, and threw another rock, a long, lazy toss that fell about 5 feet short of where I was. They mean to kill me, I thought. They really do. Yes, and what was more, they might as well get away with it. A crazy idea, both plausible and implausible at the same time, rose in my mind. I would see Roget Whitmore tracking a notice in the community doings board outside the Lake General Store. To the Martians of the TR-90, greetings. Mr. Max Meldevore, everyone's favorite Martian, will give each resident of the TR $100 if no one will use the street on Friday evening, the 17th of July, between the hours of 7 and 9 p.m. Keep your summer friends away, too, and remember, good Martians are like good monkeys. They see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. That's funny. I couldn't really believe it, but not in my current situation, and yet I almost could. At the very least, I had to grant him the luck of the devil. Tired, my sneakers heavier than ever, I tried to push one of them off and succeeded only in taking it another mouthful of lake water. They stood watching me, Devore occasionally picking up the mask from his lap and having a reviving, reviv, revivifying suck. Wait. I couldn't wait until dark. The sun exits in a hurry. We're in the West Maine, here in a hurry here in West Maine, as it does, I guess, in the mountain country everywhere. But the twilights are long and lingering, and by the time it got dark enough in the west to move without being seen, the moon would have risen in the east. I found myself imagining my obituary in the New York Times, the headline reading, Popular romantic suspense novelist drowns in Maine. Rebecca Weinstock would provide them with the author photo from the forthcoming Helen's Promise. Harold Oblonsky would say all the right things, and he'd also remember to put a modest, but not tiny, death notice in the Publisher's Weekly. He would go half and half with Putnam on it, and I sank, swallowed more water, spit it out. I began pummeling the lake again and forced myself to stop. From the shore, I could hear Roget Whitmore's tinkling laughter. You bitch, I thought. You scrawny bit. Mike, Joe said. Her voice was in my head, but it wasn't the one I make when I'm imagining her side of the mental dialogue, or when I miss her, or need to whistle her up for a while. As if to underline this, something splashed to my right, splashed hard. When I looked in that direction, I saw no fish, not even a ripple. What I saw instead was our swimming float, anchored about 100 yards away in the sunset-colored water. I can't swim that far, baby, I croaked. Did you say something, Noonan? Devore called from the shore. He cupped a mocking hand to one of his huge wax lump ears. Couldn't quite make it out. You sound all out of breath. More tinkling laughter from Whitmore. He was Johnny Carson and she was Ed McMahon. You can make it. I'll help you. The float, I realized, might be my only chance. There wasn't another one on this part of the shore, and it was at least 10 yards beyond Whitmore's longest rock shot so far. I began to dog paddle in that direction, my arms now as leaden as my feet. Each time I felt my head on the verge of going under, I paused, treading water, telling myself to take it easy. I was in pretty good shape and doing okay. Telling myself that if I didn't panic, I'll be all right. The old bitch and the even older bastard resumed pacing me, but they saw where I was headed and the laughter stopped. So did the taunts. For a long time, the swimming float seemed to draw no closer. I told myself that was just because the light was fading, the color of the water draining from red to purple to a near black that was the color of the Vor's gums. But I was able to muster less and less conviction for this idea as my breath shortened and my arms grew heavier. When I was still 30 yards away, a cramp struck my left leg. I rolled sideways like a swamped sailboat, trying to reach the bunched muscle. More water poured down my throat. I tried to cough it out, but retched and went under with my stomach still trying to heave and my fingers still looking for the knotted place above the knee. I'm really drowning, I thought, strangely calm now that it was happening. This is how it happens. This is it. Then I felt a hand seize me by the nape of the neck. The pain of having my hair yanked brought me back to reality in a flash. It was better than an epinephrine injection. I felt another hand clamp around my left leg. There was a brief but terrific sense of heat. The cramp let go, and I broke the surface swimming. Really swimming this time, not just dog paddling. And in what seemed like seconds, I was climbing to the ladder on the side of the float, breathing in great snatching gasps, waiting to see if I was going to be all right or if my heart was going to detonate in my chest like a hand grenade. At last my lungs started to overcome my oxygen debt, and everything began to calm down. I gave it another minute, then climbed out of the water into what was now the ashes of twilight. I stood facing west for a little while, bent over with my hands on my knees, dripping a single bird, but that fabled double eagle. There was no one to flip it to. The street was empty. Devore and Whitmore were gone. Maybe they were gone. I do well to remember there was a lot of the street I couldn't see. I sat cross-legged on the float until the moon rose, waiting and watching for any movement. Half an hour, I think, maybe 45 minutes. I checked my watch, but got no help there. It had shipped some water and stopped, at 7:30. And the other satisfactions Devore owed me, I could now add the price. To the other satisfactions Devore owed me, I could now add the price of my Timex Indigo. It's $29.95, asshole. Cough it up. At last I climbed back down the ladder, slipped into the water, and stroked for shore as quietly as I could. I was rested. My head had stopped aching, although the knot above the nape of the neck still throbbed steadily, and I no longer felt off balance and incredulous. In some ways, that had been the worst of it, trying to cope not just with the apparition of the drowned boy, the flying rocks, and the lake, but with the pervasive sense that none of this could be happening, that rich old software moguls did not try to drown novelists who strayed into their line of sight. Had tonight's adventure been a case of simple straying into Devore's view, though? A coincidental meeting? No more than that? Wasn't it likely he'd been having me watched ever since the 4th of July? Maybe from the other side of the lake by people with huge powered optical equipment. Paranoid bullshit, I would have said. At least I would have said it before the two of them almost sank me in Dark Score Lake, like a kid's paper boat in a mud puddle. I decided I didn't care who might be watching from the other side of the lake. I didn't care if the two of them were still lurking on one of the 3 shielded parts of the street either. I swam until I could feel strands of waterweed tickling my ankles and see the crescent of my beach. Then I stood up, wincing at the air, which now felt cold on my skin. I limped to shore, one hand raised to fend off a hail of rocks, but no rocks came. I stood for a moment on the street, my jeans and polo shirt dripping, looking first one way and then the other. It seemed I had this little part of the world to myself. Last, I looked back at the water, where weak moonlight beat a track from the thumbnail of beach out to the swimming float. Thanks, Joe, I said, and started up the railroad ties to the house. I got halfway, then I had to stop and sit down. I had never been so utterly tired in my life. Stop eating my carpet. It's mine. Stop that. Are you done? What are you doing? You're not getting my carpet. No, it's mine. Mine. My Steelers carpet. She's trying to eat it. She already got a piece of it out. Stop that. I don't know what that is. But you're not getting this. I will cut the strings off, but you're not eating it. So we finished 17, and we're at almost an hour. The Mighty Gorg. That was sweet. That was a very sweet message. Now, if you give me just a couple minutes, my puppy needs outside. I'm going to take her out, and I will be back. So I'm going to put up my BRB, and then we're going to come back and we're going to read chapter 18, because I'm reading 2 chapters tonight. So give me just about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'll be right back, okay? You guys get your drink, get your snacks, whatever you need. We'll be right back. Come on, baby. There you go. You got an itch? All right, come on. All right, let me look. Harley, come on. There she is.
follows him. The dog runs up to a house and drops his bag on the step. He goes back down the path, takes a big run, and throws himself whack against the door. He does this again and again. No answer. So he jumps on a wall, walks around the garden, beats against the window, jumps off, and waits. A big guy over starts cursing, shouting. The butcher runs up and screams at the guy, "What the hell are you doing? The dog is a genius." "Genius, my ass! It's the second time this week he's forgotten his keys." The butcher is
That's funny. Oh my gosh, that's funny. He forgot his keys. Oh, that's great. Okay, I'm back. Did she go upstairs again? Oh my god. Is your door closed? If the door's closed, she can't get in.
No, it's not closed.
Yeah, you might want to go chase her. All right, so we are back. We are on to chapter 18. My puppy decided she was going upstairs. Yeah. So, what the heck? Dude commented and then left. Goodness gracious. All right, we're on to chapter 18. I climbed the stairs to the deck instead of going around to the front door. Still moving slowly and marveling at how my legs felt twice their normal weight. When I stepped into the living room, I looked around with wide eyes of someone who had been away for a decade and returned to find everything just as he left it. Bunter the Moose on the wall, a Boston Globe on the couch, a compilation of tough stuff crossword puzzles on the end table, the plate on the counter with the remains of my stir fry still on it. Looking at these things brought the realization home full force. I had gone for a walk, leaving all this normal light clutter behind, and had almost died instead. Had almost been murdered. I began to shake. I went into the north wing bathroom, took off my wet clothes, and threw them in the tub. Splat. Then, still shaking, I turned and stared at myself in the mirror over the wash basin. I looked like someone who had been on a losing side of a barroom brawl. One bicep bore a long, clotted gash. A blackish-purple bruise was unfurling what looked like shadowy wings on my left collarbone. There was a blood furrow on my neck and behind my ear, where the lovely Roguette had caught me with a stone in her ring. I took my shaving mirror and used it to check the back of my head. "Can't you get that through your thick skull?" my mother used to shout at me and Sid when we were kids, and now I thanked God that Ma had apparently been right about the thickness factor, at least in my case. The spot where Devore had struck me with his cane looked like the cone of a recently extinct volcano. Whitmore's bullseye had left a red wound that would need stitches if I wanted to avoid a scar. Bloody, rusty, and thin, stained the back of my neck all around the hairline. God knew how much had flown out of that unpleasant-looking red mouth and had been washed away by the lake. I poured hydrogen peroxide into my cupped palm, steeled myself, and slapped it on the gash behind there like aftershave. The bite was monstrous, and I had to tighten my lips to keep from crying out. When the pain started to fade a little, I soaked cotton balls with more peroxide and cleaned my other wounds. I showered, threw on a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, then went into the hall to phone the county sheriff. There was no need for directory assistance. The Castle Rock PD and the county sheriff's numbers were on the in case of emergency card, thumbtacked to the bulletin board, along with numbers for the fire department, ambulance service, and the 900 number where you can get 3 answers to that day's Times crossword for $1.50. I dialed the first 3 numbers fast, then began to slow down. I got as far as 955-960 before stopping altogether. I stood there in the hall with the phone pressed against my ear, visualizing another headline. This one not in the decorous Times, but the rowdy New York Post. Novelist to aging compute king, you big bully. Along with the side-by-side pictures of me looking roughly my age and Max Devore looking roughly 106. The Post would have great fun telling its readers how Devore, along with his companion, an elderly lady who might weigh 90 pounds soaking wet, had lumped up a novelist half his age. A guy who looked in the photograph at least reasonably thin and fit. The phone got tired of holding only 6 of the required 7 numbers in its rudimentary brain, double-clicked, and dumped me back to the open line. I took the handset away from my ear, stared at it for a moment, then set it gently back into its cradle. I'm not a sissy about the sometimes whimsical, sometimes hateful attention of the press, but I'm weary, as I would be around a bad-tempered, fur-bearing mammal. Get out of there, Phoebe. Out. America has turned the people who entertain it into weird, high-class whores, and the media jeers at any celeb who dares complain about his or her treatment. Quit ya bitchin', cried the newspapers and TV gossip shows. The tone is one of mingled triumph and indignation. Didn't you really think we paid you the big bucks just to sing a song or swing a Louisville slugger? Wrong asshole. We pay so we can be amazed when you do it well, whatever it happens to be in your particular case. And also because it's gratifying when you fucked up. The truth is, your supplies. If you cease to be amazing, we can always kill you and eat you. They can't really eat you, of course. They can print pictures of you with your shirt off and say you're running too fat. They can talk about how much you drink and how many pills you take and snicker about the night you pulled some scarlet onto your lap at Spago and tried to stick your tongue in her ear. But they can't really eat you. So it wasn't the thought of the Post calling me a crybaby or being part of Jay Leno's opening monologue that made me put the phone down. It was the realization that I had no proof. No one had seen us. And I realized finding an alibi for himself and his personal assistant would be the easiest thing in the world for Max Devore. There was one other thing, too. The caper. Imagining the county sheriff sending out George Footman, a.k.a. Daddy, to take my statement on how the mean man had knocked little Mikey into the lake. How the 3 of them would laugh later about it. I called John Sturrow instead, wanting him to tell me I'm doing the right thing, the only thing that made any sense. Wanting him to remind me that only desperate men were driven to such desperate lengths. I would ignore, at least for the time being, how the 2 of them had laughed, as if they were having the time of their lives, and that nothing had changed in regard to Kai Devore. Her grandfather's custody case still sucked bog water. I got John's recording machine at home and left a message. Just call Mike Noonan, no emergency, but feel free to call late. Then I tried his office, mindful of the script according to John Grisham. Young lawyers work until they drop. I listened to the firm's recording machine, then followed instructions and punched STO on my phone keypad, the first 3 letters of John's last name. There was a click and he came on the line, another recorded version, unfortunately. Hi, this is John Storrow. I've gone up to Philly for the weekend to see my mom and dad. I'll be in the office Monday for the rest of the week. I'll be out on business from Tuesday to Friday. You'll probably have most luck trying to reach me at. The number he gave began 207-955, which meant Castle Rock. I imagined it was the hotel where he'd stayed before, the nice one up on the view. Mike Noonan, I said. Call me when you can. I left a message on your apartment machine, too. I went to the kitchen to get a beer, then only stood in front of the refrigerator playing with the magnets. Whore master, he'd call me. Stay there, whore master. Where's your whore? A minute later, he had offered to save my soul. Quite funny, really. Like the alcoholic offering to take care of your liquor cabinet. He spoke of you with what you think was genuine affection, Maddie had said. Your great-grandfather and his great-grandfather shit in the same pit. I left the refrigerator with all the beer still safe inside, went back to the phone and called Maddie. Hi, said another obvious recorded voice. I was on a roll. It's me, but either I'm out or not able to come to the phone right now, right this minute. Leave me a message, okay? A pause, the mic rustling, the distant whisper, and then Kyra, so loud she almost blew my ear off. Leave a happy message! What followed was laughter from both of them, cut off by the beep. Hi, Maddie, it's Mike Noonan. I said, I just wanted. I don't know how I would have finished that thought, and I didn't have to. There was a click, and then Maddie herself said, Hello, Mike. There was such a difference between this dreary, defeated-sounding voice and the cheerful one on the tape that for a moment I was silent. Then I asked her what was wrong. Nothing, she said, then began to cry. Everything. I lost my job. Lindy fired me. Firing wasn't what Lindy had called it, of course. She'd called it belt-tightening. But it was firing all right, and I knew that if I looked into the funding of the Four Lakes Consolidated Library, I would discover that one of the chief supporters over the years had been Mr. Max DeVore, and he'd continue to be one of the chief supporters if, that was, Lindy Briggs played ball. We shouldn't have talked where she could see us doing it, I said, knowing I could have stayed away from the library completely, and Maddie would be just as gone, and we probably should have seen this coming. John Sturrow did see it. She was still crying, but making an effort to get it under control. He said Max DeVore would probably want to make sure I was deep in the corner as he could push me, come to the custody hearing. He said DeVore would want to make sure I answered, I'm unemployed, Your Honor, when the judge asked where I worked. I told John Mr. Briggs would never do anything so low, especially to a girl who'd given such a brilliant talk to Melville's Bartleby. Do you know what he told me? No. He said, You're very young. I thought that was a patronizing thing to say, but he was right, wasn't he, Maddie? What am I going to do, Mike? What am I going to do? The panic rat had moved on down to Wasp Hill Road. It sounded like. Thought, quite coldly, why not become my mistress? Your title will be research assistant. A perfectly Jake occasion as far as the IRS is concerned. I'll throw in clothes, a couple of charge cards, a house, say goodbye to the rust bucket double wide on Wasp Hill Road, and the 2-week vacation. How does February in Miami sound? Plus Kaya's education, of course, and a hefty cash bonus at the end of the year. I'll be considerate too, considerate and discreet. Once or twice a week, and never until your little girl's fast asleep. All you have to do is say yes and give me a key. All you have to do is slide over when I slide in. All you have to do is let me do what I want. All through the dark, all through the night. Let me touch where I want to touch. Let me do what I want to do. Never say no. Never say stop. I closed my eyes. Mike, are you there? Sure, I said. I touched the throbbing gash on the back of my head and winced. You're going to do just fine, Maddie. The trailer's not paid for, she nearly wailed. I have 2 overdue phone bills, and they're threatening to cut off the service. There's something wrong with the Jeep's transmission, and the rear axle as well. I can pay for Kai's last week of vacation Bible school, I guess. Mrs. Briggs gave me 3 weeks' pay in lieu of notice. But how will I buy her shoes? She outgrows everything so fast. There's holes in all her shorts, and most of her goddamn underwear. She was starting to weep again. I'm going to take care of you until you get back on your feet, I said. No, I can't let. You can, and for Kyra's sake, you will. Later on, if you still want to, you can pay me back. We'll keep tabs on every dollar and dime, if you like, but I'm going to take care of you. And you'll never take off your clothes when I'm with you. That's a promise, and I'm going to keep it. Mike, you don't have to do this. Maybe, maybe not. But I am going to do it. You just try and stop me. I called, meaning to tell her what had happened to me, giving her a humorous version, but that now seemed like the worst idea in the world. This custody thing is going to be over before you know it, and if you can't find anyone brave enough to put you in work down here, once it is, I'll find someone up in Derry who will do it. Besides, tell me the truth. Aren't you starting to feel that it might be time for a change of scenery? She managed to scrap a laugh. I guess you could say that. Heard from John today? Actually, yes. He's visiting his parents in Philadelphia, but he gave me the number there. I called him. He'd said he was taken with her. Perhaps she was taken with him as well. I told myself the thorny little tug I felt across my emotions at the idea of only my imagination. Was at the idea was only my imagination. Tried to tell myself that anyway. What did he say about you losing your job the way you did? The same thing you did. But he didn't make me feel safe. You do. You do. I don't know why. I did. I was the older man, and that is our chief attraction to young women. We make them feel safe. He's coming up again Tuesday morning. I said I'd have lunch with him. Smoothly, not a tremor or hesitation in my voice, I said, maybe I could join you. Maddie's own voice warmed at the suggestion. Her ready acceptance made me feel paradoxically guilty. That would be great. Why don't I call him and suggest that both of you come over here? I could barbecue again. Maybe I'll keep Kai home from Vacation Bible School, VBS, and make it a foursome. She's hoping you'll read her another story. She really enjoyed that. That sounds great, I said, and meant it. Adding Kyra made it all seem more natural, less of an intrusion on my part, also less like a date on theirs. John could not be accused of taking an unethical interest in his client. In the end, he'd probably thank me. I believe Kai might be ready to move on to Hansel and Gretel. How about you, Maddie? All right? Much better than I was before you called. Good. Things are going to be all right. Promise me? I think I just did. There was a slight pause. Are you all right, Mike? You sound a little, I don't know, a little strange. I'm okay, I said, and I was, for someone who had been pretty sure he was drowning less than an hour ago. Can I ask you one question before I go? Because this is driving me crazy. Of course. The night we had dinner, you said Devore told you his great-grandfather and mine knew each other. Pretty well, according to him. He said they shit in the same pit. I thought that was elegant. Did he say anything else? Think hard. She did and came up with nothing. I told her to call me if something about the conversation did occur to her, and if she got lonely or scared, or if she started to feel worried about anything. I don't like saying too much, but I had already decided I'd have to have a frank talk with John about my latest adventure. It might be prudent to have a private detective from Lewiston, George Kennedy, like the actor, put a man or two on the TR to keep an eye on Maddie and Kyra. Max Devore was mad, just as my caretaker had said. I didn't understand then, but I did now. Anytime I started to doubt, all I had to do was touch the back of my head. I returned to the fridge and once more forgot to open it. My hands went to the magnets instead, and again began moving them around, watching as words formed, broke apart, evolved. It was a peculiar kind of writing. But it was writing. I could tell by the way I was starting to trance out. That half-hypnotized state is one you cultivate until you can switch it off, on and off at will. At least you can when things are going well. The intuitive part of the mind unlocks itself when you begin to work and rises to the height of about 6 feet, maybe 10 on good days. Once there, it simply hovers, sending black magic messages and bright pictures. For the balance of the day, that part is locked to the rest of the machinery and goes pretty much forgotten, except on certain occasions when it comes loose on its own and you trance out unexpectedly. Your mind makes associations which have nothing to do with the rational thought and glaring with unexpected images. That is in some ways the strangest part of the creative process. The muses are ghosts, and sometimes they come in uninvited. My house is haunted. Sara Laughs has always been haunted. You stirred 'em up. Stirred. I wrote on the refrigerator, but it didn't look right, so I made a circle of fruit and vegetable magnets around it. That was better. Much. I stood there for a moment, hands crossed over my chest as I crossed them at my desk when I was stuck for a word or a phrase. then took off stir and put on haunt, making haunted. It's haunted in a circle, I said, and barely heard the faint chime of Bunter's bell, as if in agreement. I took the letters off, and as I did, found myself thinking how odd it was to have a lawyer named Romeo. Romeo went in a circle, and a detective named George Kennedy. George went on the fridge. I wondered if Kennedy could help me with Andy Drake. Drake on the fridge. Maybe give me some insights. I'd never written about a private detective before, and it's the little stuff. Rake off, leave the D, add details. That makes the difference. I turned a 3 on its back and put an I beneath it, making a pitchfork. The devil's in the details. From there I went somewhere else. I don't know where exactly, because I was tranced out. The intuitive part of my mind was part of my mind up so high a search party couldn't have found it. I stood in front of my fridge and played with the letters, spelling out little pieces of thought without even thinking about them. You mightn't believe such a thing is possible, but every writer knows it is. What brought me back was light splashing across the windows of the foyer. I looked up and saw the shape of a car pulling in to a stop behind my Chevrolet. A cramp of terror seized my belly. That was the moment when I would have given anything I owned for a loaded gun, because it was Footman, had to be. DeVore had called him when he and Whitmore got back to Warrington's, had told him Noonan refused to be a good Martian, so get over there and fix him. When the driver's door opened and the dome light of the visitor's car came on, I breathed a conditional sigh of relief. I didn't know who it was, but I was sure it sure wasn't Daddy. This fellow didn't look as if he could take care of a housefly with a rolled-up newspaper, although I supposed there was plenty of people who had made the same mistake about Jeffrey Dahmer. About the fridge was a cluster of aerosol cans, all of them old and probably not ozone friendly. I didn't know how Mrs. M had missed them, but I was pleased she had. I took the first one my hand touched. Black Flag. Excellent choice. Thumbed off the cap and stuck the can in my left front pocket of my jeans. Then I turned to the drawers on the right of the sink. The top one contained silverware. The second one held what Joe called kitchen shit. Everything from poultry thermometers to some gadgets you stick in corn cobs so you don't burn your fingers off. The third one down held a generous selection of mismatched steak knives. I took one, put it in my right front pocket of my jeans, and went to the door. The man on the stoop jumped a little when I turned on the outside light, then blinked through the door at me like a nearsighted rabbit. He was about 5'4", skinny, pale. He wore his hair cropped in a sort of cut known as a wiffle in my boyhood days. His eyes were brown, guarding them with a pair of horn-rimmed glasses with greasy-looking lenses. His little hands hung at his sides. One held the handle of a flat leather case, the other a small white oblong. I didn't think it was my destiny to be killed by a man with a business card in one hand, so I opened the door. The guy smiled, the anxious sort of smile people always seem to wear in Woody Allen movies. He was wearing a Woody Allen outfit, too, I saw. Faded plaid shirt with a little too short at the wrists, chinos a little too baggy in the crotch. Someone must have told him about the resemblance, I thought. That's got to be it. Mr. Noonan? Yes? He handed me the card. Next Century Real Estate. It said in raised gold letters. Below this, in more modest black, was my visitor's name. I'm Richard Osgood, he said, as if I couldn't read, and held out his hand. The American male's need to respond to that gesture in kind is deeply ingrained. But that night I resisted it. He held out his little pink paw out a moment longer, then lowered it and wiped the palm nervously against his chinos. I have a message for you from Mr. Devore. I waited. May I come in? No, I said. He took a step backward, wiped his hand on his pants again, and seemed to gather himself. I hardly think there's any need to be rude, Mr. Noonan. I wasn't being rude. If I wanted to be rude, I would have treated him to a face full of roach repellent. Max Devore and his minder tried to drown me in the lake this evening. If my manners seem a little off to you, that's probably it. Osgood look of shock was real, I think. You must be working too hard on your latest project, Mr. Noonan. Max Devore is going to be 86 on his next birthday, if he makes it, which now seems to be in some doubt. Poor old fellow can hardly even walk from his chair to his bed anymore. As for Roget, I see your point, I said. In fact, I saw it 20 minutes ago, without any help from you. I hardly believe it myself, and I was there. Give me whatever it is you want me to you have for me. Fine, he said in a prissy little, all right, be that way voice. He unzipped the pouch on the front of the leather bag and brought out a white envelope, business size and sealed. I took it, hoping Osgood couldn't sense how hard my heart was thumping. Devore moved pretty damned fast for a man who traveled with an oxygen tank. The question was, what kind of move was this? Thanks, I said, beginning to close the door. I'd tipped you the price of a drink, but I left my wallet on the dresser. Wait, you're supposed to read it and give me an answer. I raised my eyebrows. I don't know where Devore got the notion that he could order me around, but I have no intention of allowing his ideas to influence my behavior. Buzz off. His lips turned down, creeping deep dimples at the corners of his mouth, and all at once he didn't look like Woody Allen at all. He looked like a 50-year-old real estate broker who had sold his soul to the devil and now couldn't stand to see anyone yank the boss's forked tail. Stop that. Stop that. Piece of friendly advice, Mr. Noonan. You want to watch it. Max Devore is no man to fool around with. Lucky for me, I'm not fooling around. I closed the door and stood in the foyer, holding the envelope and watching Mr. Next Century Real Estate. He looked pissed off and confused. No one had given him the bum's rush just lately, I guessed. Maybe it would do him some good. Lend a little perspective to his life. Remind him that, Max Devore or no Max Devore, Richie Osgood would still never stand more than 5'7", even in cowboy boots. Mr. Devore wants an answer, he called through the door. I'll phone, I called back, then slowly raised my middle fingers to the double eagle I'd hoped to give Max and Roget earlier. In the meantime, perhaps you could convey this. I almost expected him to take off his glasses and rub his eyes. He walked back to his car instead, tossed the case in, then followed it. I watched until he had backed up to the lane, and I was sure he was gone. Then I went to the living room and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, faintly scented with the perfume my mother had worn when I was just a kid. White Shoulders, I think it's called. Across the top, neat, ladylike, printed in slightly raised letters was Roget D. Whitmore. Below it was this message, written in a slightly shaky, feminine hand. 8:30 p.m. Dear Mr. Noonan, Max wishes to convey how glad he was to meet you. I might echo that sentiment. You are amusing and entertain. You are a very amusing and entertaining fellow. We enjoy your antics ever so much. Now to business. M offers you a very simple deal. If you promise to cease asking questions about him, and if you promise to cease all legal maneuvering, if you promise to let him rest in peace, and so to speak, then Mr. Devore promises to cease efforts to gain custody of his granddaughter. If this suits If this suits, you need only tell Mr. Osgood I agree. He will carry the message. Max hopes to return to California by private jet very soon. He has business which can be put off no longer, although he has enjoyed his time here and has found you particularly interesting. He wants me to remind you that custody has its responsibilities and urges you not to forget he said so. Roget. P.S. He reminds me that you didn't answer his question. Does her cunt suck? Max is quite curious on that point. R. You promised to cease asking questions about him, promised to cease all legal maneuvering, and promised to let him rest in peace. He promises to cease efforts to gain custody. Wow. I read this note over a second time, and then a third. I started to put it on the table, then read it a fourth time. It was as if I couldn't get the sense of it. I had to restrain the urge to fly to the telephone and call Maddie at once. It's over, Maddie, I'd say. Taking your job and dunking me in the lake were the last two shots of the war. He's giving up. No, not till I'm absolutely sure. I called Warrington's instead, where I got a fourth answering machine of the night. DeVore and Whitmore hadn't bothered with anything warm and fuzzy either. A voice was as cold as a motel ice machine simply told me to leave a message at the sound of the beep. It's Noonan, I said. Before I could go any further, there was a click and someone picked up. Did you enjoy your swim? Roget Whitmore asked in a smoky, mocking voice. If I had seen her in the flesh, I might have imagined a Barbara Steinway type at her most coldly attractive, coiled on a red velvet couch in a peach-soaked dressing gown, telephone in one hand, ivory cigarette holder in the other. If I'd caught up with you, Miss Whitmore, I might have made you understand my feelings perfectly. Ooh, she said, my thighs are a-tingle. Please spare me the image of your thighs. Sticks and stones, Mr. Noonan, she said. To what do we owe the pleasure of your call? I sent Mr. Osgood away without a reply. Max thought you might, he said. He said, our young whoremaster believes in the value of a personal response. You can tell that just looking at him. He gets the uglies when he loses, doesn't he? Mr. DeVore doesn't lose. Her voice dropped at least 40 degrees, and all the mocking good humor bailed out on the way down. He may change his goals, but he doesn't lose. You were the one who looked like a loser tonight, Mr. Noonan, paddling around and yelling out there in the lake. You were scared, weren't you? Yes, badly. You were right to be. I wonder if you know how lucky you are. May I tell you something? Of course, Mike. May I call you Mike? Why don't you stick with Mr. Noonan? Now, are you listening? With bated breath. Your boss is old, he's nutty, and I suspect he's past the point where he can effectively manage a Yahtzee scoreboard, let alone a custody suit. He was wiped a week ago. Do you have a point? As a matter of fact, I do. So get it right. If either of you ever tries anything remotely like that again, I'll come after that old fuck and jam his snot-smeared oxygen mask so far up his ass he'll be able to aerate his lungs from the bottom. And if I see you on the street, Ms. Whitmore, I'll use you for the shot put. Do you understand me? I stopped, breathing hard, amazed, and also rather disgusted with myself. If you told me I had such speech in me, I would have scoffed. After a long pause, I said, Mrs. Whitmore, you still there? I'm here, she said. I wanted her to be furious, but she actually sounded amused. Who has the uglies now, Mr. Noonan? I do, I said, and don't you forget it, you rock-throwing bitch. What is your answer to Mr. DeVore? We have a deal. I shut up, the lawyers shut up. He gets out of Maddie and Kyra's life. If, on the other hand, he continues to, oh, I know, you'll bore him and stroke him. I wonder how you'll feel about all this a week from now, you arrogant, stupid creature. Before I could reply, it was on the tip of my tongue to tell her that even at her best, she still threw like a girl. She was gone. I stood there with the telephone in my hand for a few seconds, then hung it up. Was it a trick? It felt like a trick, but at the same time it didn't. John needed to know about this. He hadn't left his parents' number on his answer machine, but Maddie had it. If I called her back, though, I'd be obliged to tell her what had just happened. It might be a good idea to put off any further calls until tomorrow, to sleep on it. I stuck my hand in my pocket and damn near impaled it on the steak knife hiding there. I'd forgotten all about it. I took it out, carried it back to the kitchen, and returned it to the drawer. Next, I fished out the aerosol can, turned to put it back on the top of the fridge with its elderly brothers, then stopped. Inside the circle of fruit and vegetable magnets was this: DGOW 19N. Had I done that myself? Had I been so far into the zone, so tranced out, that I had put a mini crossword on the refrigerator without remembering it? And if so, what did it mean? G down, 19 down, G down. Huh, go to 19 down. Maybe someone else put it up, I thought. One of my invisible roommates. Go down 19N, I said, reaching out and touching the letters. A compass heading. Or maybe it meant go 19 down. That suggested crosswords again. Sometimes in a puzzle, you get a clue which reads simply C19 across, C19 down. If that was the meaning here, what puzzle was I supposed to check? I could use a little help here, I said, but there was no answer. Not from the astral plane, not from inside of my own head. I finally got the can of beer I'd been promising myself and took it back to the sofa. I picked up my tough stuff crossword book and looked at the puzzle I was currently working. Liquor is quicker, it was called, and it was filled with the stupid puns which only crossword addicts find amusing. Tipsy actor Marlon Brandy. Tipsy Southern novel Tequila Mockingbird. Drives the DA to drink bourbon of proof. And the definition of 19 down was Oriental nurse, which every cruciverbalist in the universe knows is Amma. Nothing in liquor is quicker, connected to what was going on in my life, at least that I could see. I thumbed through some of the other puzzles in the book, looking at 19 downs. Marble worker's tool, chisel, CNN's favorite howler, 2 words, wolf blitzer, ethanol and dimethyl ether, e.g., isomers. Let's see, I tossed the book aside in disgust. Who said it had to have been a particular crossword collection anyway? There were probably 50 others in the house, 4 or 5 in the drawer of every end table on which my beer can stand. I leaned back on the sofa and crossed my eyes. I always liked a horse. Sometimes their place was on my face. This is where good pups and vile dogs may walk side by side. There's no town drunk here. We all take turns. This is where it happens. I fell asleep and woke up 3 hours later with a stiff neck and a terrible throb in the back of my head. Thunder was rumbling thickly far off in the White Mountains, and the house seemed pretty hot, very hot. When I got up from the couch, the backs of my thighs more or less peeled away from the fabric. I shuffled down to the north wing like an old man, looked at my wet clothes, thought about taking them into the laundry room, and then decided if I bent over that far, my head might explode. You ghosts take care of it, I muttered. If you can change the pants and the underwear around on the whirligig, you can put my clothes in the hamper. I took 3 Tylenol and went to bed. At some point, I woke a second time and heard a phantom child sobbing. Stop, I told it. Stop it. Kai, no one's going to take you anywhere. You're safe. Then I went back to sleep again. And that is where we are going to stop for this evening. Hopefully, you guys like that one. We are up to chapter 19, so we are almost done with the book. Look at this. We're almost done. We don't have much left. So we're going to stop there. So he's gone to sleep after he's almost been drowned. So let's see how he does. Tomorrow we will be reading 19, maybe 20, depending on how long the chapters are. So, but yeah, I think we did pretty good. We did 2 chapters today, a little over an hour and a half. So, plus my little 5-minute break in between. So I'd say we did pretty good. So, I am going to let y'all think on that tonight. It is already 11:15 here. I am going to grab my book and start reading my misery. Hopefully I can finish it this weekend. So I will see you guys later. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for, chilling out with me. And I don't know if y'all read this message. Where have you been all my life? Lady Rain Stream. Please don't let me interrupt. Please continue. I have no idea where the guy went. He got to give a message, and I have no idea who this guy is, but he's got some cute little pics on his thing, so that's a plus. Anyway, I love when you guys chat, even just a little bit. So hopefully y'all have a good night. This is Saturday going into Sunday for me, so I am going to enjoy my Sunday after we read, and I will see you guys later. Love y'all. Thank you for being with me. I really appreciate it. Y'all have a good night. Bye.